Hey everybody, this podcast is both recorded using and sponsored by Riverside, a cloud-based virtual recording studio that allows remote podcast recording so much easier than any way I've ever tried. In order to get started, all you do is sign up for an account, you create yourself a new session, link that session to whoever your guest is, either through an automatic email or just copying and pasting, and then hit record. And when you're done, each individual file is saved separately. So that means each video track is separate, so you could do nice multicam editing if you prefer to, and each audio track is separate as well, so that you could process each person's audio differently, which is so essential when you have people recording with different types of microphones in different rooms. Processing them separately helps so much. Now, I've had really good luck with Riverside, and I've found it to be much more reliable than every other method I've tried. However, I realize that there are plenty of untrustworthy nerds out there like I am, so let me show you a very cool trick on how to guarantee that you don't lose anything from your recordings. Because there's that old saying, 2 is 1, 1 is none, and I pretty much live by that for these podcasts because there's no getting back that moment when you're having a cool conversation. So all you have to do in order to have 2 copies of this is to fire up any screen recording software that you use and either record just the window or your entire screen and simply make sure the audio is coming through. I've done this for every single Riverside interview I've done, and I have never once used any of the local recordings. I always end up using the much higher quality Riverside recordings, except it's just so much nicer for me to know that there is a backup if I need it, and it always puts me at ease doing it this way. So by no means am I trying to say you have to, but I just know that there are so many untrustworthy nerds out there like me that would rather have 2 at the same time, and doing it this way is yet another reason why you would want to use Riverside instead of just a local copy, because when you're doing just a local version, it's much harder to get a second copy out there. So if you're interested, please check out the links in the description for 30% off either a multi-month or yearly plan. Just go to retrorgb.link/Riverside and use coupon code RetroRGB30. Okay, let's jump into the interview because this one was a lot of fun, and I hope you'll all enjoy hearing from Tor as well. Hey everybody, I am here with developer Tor, who I discovered just a few weeks ago because my friend Stika tagged me in a post on Twitter that showed your very amazing blog entry talking about how you programmed for the Genesis and made your own device for it way back when, which there wasn't the resources that you have available today. So I wanted to reach out to talk to you and kind of hear about your journey and all of that other stuff. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Tor nestenius. I'm plus 50 years old, and I live in Sweden, in the south of Sweden. Cold and rainy mostly nowadays.
I'm a big fan of Sweden. I've been there only once. I was in Borås in Gothenburg, but
Okay.
one of my favorite band is In Flames, who is right outside of Gothenburg. So I've been deep in Swedish culture since 99, 2000, whenever the Clayman album came out.
Okay, great.
So, I guess the first thing that I want to start with is just how does one back then, pre-mainstream internet, pre all of the amazing homebrew resources you have,
Yeah.
how did you even know to begin that journey? And then could you kind of walk us through what exactly you did? I'll obviously link to your blog post and your social media, but I think a lot of
Sure.
people jumping into this might not have had the time to read it
Yeah.
yet, and I want to hear it directly from you anyway because that was really awesome.
Yeah. Can I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Let's do that. And so I started at a very young age. I got my Commodore VIC 20 back then, and I started programming, and I got a really nice picture here back then. That's me. At the computer trade show in a local community, and I even took, when I was kind of 11, 12, I took evening classes in basic programming. So me, 12 years old, and then a lot of older guys, learning programming. And so I was kind of pretty kind of obsessed by learning and tinkering with my Commodore VIC-20. And then I went to the Commodore C64, and then I went to the Atari ST. And of course, you start with gaming and you learn, just playing games, but then you want to kind of learn more and look under the cover. So me and my friend, we created a kind of a demo group for the Atari ST called Sync. So we were kind of a bunch of guys, doing various kind of demos and applications. I think the first one we made was one of the first ones we made was kind of things like that, demos, trying to maximize and trying to get the most kind of capacity and the most extreme kind of effects out of the computer. So of course, to maximize it, we had to use the assembly language, and we had to use all the kind of bells and whistles of the computer, and trying to really counting clock cycles and trying to optimize, and then trying to beat the other gangs on Atari as the computer platform. So we went to competitions. We did a lot of kind of crazy projects on Atari. And that Atari was also pretty kind of open. You could easily connect things. You could make some LED light to flash, and you could connect other devices to it. And I was also kind of into electronics, so I started to do wire wrap my own computers, my kind of single board computer chips, and using the 6502 CPU and also the 68000 and 68008 CPU, and doing a lot of wire wrapping and tinkering. So I was pretty good at the electronics and the hardware side, and combining that with the assembly language of the Motorola 68K. I started to dive more into it and do a lot of kind of experimentations and tinkering. And we learned that. So I was pretty good at it, and I kind of studying the kind of Motorola engineering kind of the engineer, the Motorola kind of gave out kind of design guidelines and engineering guides or something like that.
Yeah, data sheets and the suggested ways. I'm drawing a blank too because I use them all the time for like the video chips. But so just to interrupt for a second, but when you're talking about working on these processors back then, we didn't have sources available like JLC PCB where you could design on free software, design your board, and then 3 days later have a whole stack of them appear. You had to use what you just referred to as wire wrapping, where you put it all on a breadboard. And it looks like just a mess of wires going across it because that's the only option you had.
Yeah, I mean, if it was became pretty good at it. You could, it was almost like a therapy. Like a mindfulness session. You're doing wire wrapping. You spent the countless hours of wrapping and unwrapping. Mistakes you made and so on. But it was a pretty rapid. It was very kind of rapid prototyping, and then allow me to still quickly build things. So I think I kind of wrapped, hundreds of meters of wire wrapping wires over the years. But it was pretty fun, on the lowest level. And of course, having access to PCBs and layouts and was a challenge. And, eventually I got a friend who could do some etching of a PCB board for me. So I could actually make some, pretty nice, memory, roughly nice, memory boards that, could, make it more professional and more, clean and so on. But it was a struggle because it was hard to find the equipment and, trying to do your layouts and plotting the layout on paper or on film or, to etch it. And, it was very primitive back then, but it was fun, you could do it. You could do it if you have some connections, and then you learn the hard way, And if you don't have equipment, you basically built it yourself.
Yeah, all on a breadboard. So all with wire wrapping, with placing the through-hole components on it, and then Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
I remember doing projects like that as a kid. Never that extensive though. Never to the level that you were doing, but it was fun and it was interesting and there is like you were saying almost like a meditative part of it
yeah,
where you're sitting there. It's kind of like people who really enjoy doing like cap replacements or soldering jobs where it is just kind of
yeah,
like,
yeah,
the hours just fly by. You don't even realize how much
yeah,
time's gone by.
yeah,
So you're in these demo scenes. You're competing for who could have the most badass demo and who could use the most resources and squeeze the most out of it. So
yeah,
even as a kid, you're already gaining the knowledge to start accessing these older platforms, which were mainstream platforms at the time, of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
And so that's really cool. I saw one of the things was titled Windjammers Copy Fest or something like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
you know.
was that the name
I
of
don't
an
know.
event that you attended?
I mean, we did a lot of different events, and it was kind of pretty kind of crazy back then. Going to big places like big sports arenas, and you have those crowded with computers, and you could you didn't sleep for like 48 hours or more. And it was fun. You were sharing knowledge, you're sharing kind of games, and sharing kind of skills and making new friends. It was a pretty nice environment, friendly, and then everybody was nice to each other, and you could meet the people you looked up to. So
Yeah, yeah, that's
so it
absolutely
was a
awesome.
pretty kind of amazing time back then. And when you look back, on those parties, you had all those computers. You could drive to like hundreds of miles to just get there, and you unpacked your stuff, and start gaming, and playing and coding and compete and just having a good time.
Yeah, so for anybody listening audio only, Tor's showing a picture right now that hopefully I could link to in the description, but it's basically like a sports arena. Like imagine an ice hockey rink or a basketball rink or something like that, where on the floor is exactly what you would expect, a bunch of tables and chairs with CRT-based big computers, but even in the stands, people were taking pieces of wood and tables and setting them up over other chairs so that the stairs and the chairs you could sit down in the stands and put your computer in front of you like a makeshift desk. This is one of the coolest pictures I've seen of that era. That is so cool.
So
I
I
uh,
mean, it
I've
was
been to computer meetups, but it was never like this. It was mostly swap meets and the ones that were pre 2000s were either swap meets or things that were mostly just sales based with a couple of different hangout sections. But this looks
yeah,
awesome. This looks like something I would have loved to have done as a kid.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they were pretty big as well. I mean, it was kind of if you look at the pictures here, it's quite a lot of people, attending those events. It's
Yeah.
pretty. This is from Norway, the gathering, a pretty famous party back then. So it was good old days.
And was everybody linked together on a LAN? So was this like an original LAN party style? Obviously, it might not have
I
been,
mean, some were, but it's for Atari, SD, and Amiga, you didn't have a LAN. It was more like a
Mhm.
PC thing. So sure, you could do some yeah, rough network using MIDI, a music interface in some cases, but the Ethernet and networking was not a thing on the Atari back then.
Mm.
So it was kind of you had to swap disk. That's
Yeah,
how you.
I see this as like the origin of LAN parties, and I was trying to
Yeah,
think in my head what back then could you have used to link two computers together,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
think it probably would have been the majority of just disk copying between
yeah, yeah.
between people.
So it was fun.
So you already have the experience programming for these computer platforms, and now you
Yes.
saw the Mega Drive, and you thought, well, I'd like to program for that as well, but I don't
Yeah.
have thousands and thousands of dollars to buy the dev equipment, and I guess you just decided, well, what the heck, I might as well make my own.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, eventually I was exposed to the Mega Drive. So the Mega Drive, nice and nice machine, and if you open it up, you see it's a pretty kind of pretty kind of, basic circuit board. You have your connector for the, for the cartridges, and you have your big CPU. So basically, I start by kind of connecting the dots, between the CPU and the cartridge. What goes where, and then some signals you have to kind of try to figure out, using other techniques, and then. So
what other techniques were you using when you were trying to figure those out?
So I got a few pins, but I was kind of not sure about what they did, because they did not kind of come from the CPU directly. So kind of it was kind of out of the blue. So of course I need a logic analyzer, but with no money, no equipment, so I decided to build my own kind of logic analyzer using a FIFO buffer, clocked by the CPU clocked by the CPU clock. So I was kind of triggering to start, recording the signals when the CPU get a reset signal, and then I was counter sampling for like 2 kilobytes of data, and then I could extract it to my Atari SD computer, and trying to figure out what kind of the purpose was of a different pin in correlation with the other ones that I knew, like the address strobe and read write, and the other kind of clocks on the CPU. So you have to kind of do it, try to find your way of doing it. But basically the games are pretty kind of simple. It's just like kind of a ROM cartridge. And what I wanted to do was kind of replace this one with a memory board that holds about 1 megabyte of RAM, and then trying to kind of using some techniques, adding some kind of firmware, like a boot up firmware. So I have some firmware here, but when the Mega Drive starts up, we would kind of listen and wait for a binary dump from my Atari ST, and then to run that dump when it arrives to the Mega Drive. So basically, I was going to try to replace the ROM cartridges with a static RAM, and EPROMs for storing the firmware. So it boots
And when you were designing that cartridge board that you held up, the one that you just made,
Yes.
so you kind of approached it as, all right, well, the games themselves, the cartridges on those is just a ROM chip with a little bit of circuitry around it. So
Yes.
that's how you were able to just somewhat reverse engineer it in the fact that, okay, well, these trace out to these cartridge pins, so I could fill this with my own components. So
Yeah.
probably doing that part of it was much easier than figuring out how the Genesis itself worked and how to analyze
Sure.
the signals going in and out, I'm assuming. So
Sure.
okay.
But so basically, it's kind of just a kind of replacing the ROM with a static RAM and some firmware. But of course, it takes time, and you're tinkering and trying to find a good how do I do it in a good clean way, and so it took some time to do, of course, and but the journey. I mean, I think the journey is the most fun, getting there. And eventually it worked. So I was able to get hold of a kind of documentation for the CPU. I mean, all the registers and hardware graphics modules in the Mega Drive. So I could eventually get some, sprites moving on the screen, controlled by the joystick, and that worked. But then, I actually had a few, customers who wanted to buy it, but I never kind of got around to finalize it into a more, kind of, commercial thing. But it was a fun journey, and I learned a lot by doing it. All the hours spent tinkering and short circuiting my Mega Drive. It's kind of pretty amazing how robust it is. I can't count how many times I kind of short circuit pins here and there, and it still kind of works today.
So the model Mega Drive you had, did that have the TMSS security on it that you had to get around, or did that just boot directly into the game so you didn't have to worry about it?
It did not have any security at all, so it was kind of just purely kind of standard 68,000 CPU kind of boot sequence. So that one I knew, so it kind of was pretty kind of simple to to make my own firmware, and allow it to me to download and do some basic debugging on the Mega Drive.
That's cool. You got lucky then, because if you had just gotten a slightly later model, one of the
Yeah,
ones that booted with the produced and licensed by Sega Enterprise, you would have then had an entirely new step to get around that in order to
yeah, yeah,
bypass the encryption. But without that, so you were basically just able to run it in a mode where it detected a game there, and then you were able to use your Atari ST computer to send it commands and make it do a
yeah,
few
yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's very cool. And it just, I mean, that image, that mental image alone, using an Atari ST to write and control a game on a Sega Genesis Mega Drive, like that alone is, just retro gaming nerds' brains are exploding just hearing that.
Yeah,
So that is so cool. Now,
yeah,
you said you developed mostly proof of concept and did it as a learning experience, but did you ever
yeah.
end up making any software that ran on the Mega Drive that was not,
No,
that was past your test?
I started my university studies shortly after I completed it. So then I kind of went into other projects and other journeys. But so I never got I wanted to commercialize it, or make some games on it. I would love to, but I didn't have time. I had some other priorities and some other projects that I jumped into instead.
Yeah, I hear you. So I mean that is awesome. That just a kid that was able to use what you had in front of you to figure that stuff out. And I love using the CPU clock to make your own logic analyzer. I mean, you're
Yeah,
basically using the console itself to debug and figure out how the console's working. That was that was a cool idea. I like that. It's any hardware engineers, or I guess even software engineers listening, are smiling as soon as they heard you say that.
yeah.
That's a cool thing.
So the challenge was when so I made up quite a few prototypes, all kinds of prototypes, wire wrapped, and then one here was kind of based to kind of plug into it, vertically up like that. But then eventually I went to an operation let's see, more like a dual kind of card approach. I don't know, it's a bit ugly still, but basically doing a more, let me see here, like that, and then trying to, something like that, trying to get it down without breaking the kind of, the CPU circuit board. So it was kind of pretty big, trying to find, a good kind of, I want kind of a good separation of concerns. I wanted to have a memory board to be purely a memory board, and then have my kind of firmware and logic on a separate board, and trying to kind of, okay, how do I kind of combine them in a good, sensible way that, that didn't kind of break the circuit board under stress or similar things. So a lot of kind of, experimentations, doing various kind of cards, and, trying to find a good kind of, good architecture and a good design.
So the final design was a 2-board design or a 3-board design?
Yes, two board. I
Two
mean,
board. Okay.
one kind of vertical board like that, just to kind of go into the Mega Drive, and then it connects to the main logic board, and then you plug the memory board into the kind of top circuit here. So basically, it would look something like
So 2 boards and an adapter then.
yeah,
Okay.
something like that.
That is very cool. That is very, very, very cool.
Yeah,
And just to think something like that, if you wanted to redesign that today, you could use free software to do that and have that on a board
yeah,
that's probably 1 inch by
yeah.
1 inch or something like that. Just to,
And some FPGA, and trying to all in one chip almost.
absolutely.
But
Wow, that's
that is almost like cheating.
yeah. I mean, compared to the way you did it, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
the knowledge that you gained from doing that led you on to a bunch of other projects as well, where you were able to take that and apply that to other things that you did. I know you mentioned some Atari projects as well, correct?
Yes. So, back then, one project that we did was kind of for Atari Lynx. So Atari reached out to us and because they had a problem because they couldn't get good kind of screenshots of the games for magazines because of due to the reflection and all that. So basically, we made us a small tool to, first of all, we got a brain and memory dump of a running game, and we could, from that memory dump, extract the screenshot of a running game. So we could then convert it to an image file that then could be kind of printed in the magazines. So
That is
very small
incredible.
hack. Yes. So if I don't remember, I mean, if I remember correctly, the hardware development kit for the Lynx was an Amiga, a special customized Amiga machine. So we got hold of a memory dump from it, and then on Atari we made a tool to kind of trying to locate where's the brain dump in memory, because you could look at the patterns of the binary data. Oh, there's an image, so you could kind of get in that kind of alignment to get the kind of screenshot, and it worked. So it was pretty fun.
So the process would basically be that the reviewer would get the game in the exact spot that they would want it to be, and then
Yeah.
so now you have a Lynx with all of these wires coming out of it, right?
So
Am
basically,
I getting that correct, or sorry?
I think I don't remember exactly, but we made the tool so that Atari themselves could kind of use the Lynx development kit, extract, play a game, extract a memory dump, and then we could using our tool to find out the real picture.
And what would trigger the memory dump? Did you like build a button on that, or was it just
No,
constantly reading data?
we never did that part. We just kind of got the dump and we made a tool to extract the screenshot on the links. It was a pretty
Interesting.
kind of small kind of project.
That is really cool because a lot of the times, because I'd gotten to know some people who worked in magazines back then, and they said they would often have rigs that they would build so that they could take pictures of the screen, but it was very hard to
Yeah,
photograph, and
yeah,
they were
yeah,
trying different tricks and stuff. But even as a kid, I remember some magazines had pictures that looked great and others didn't. So I guess somebody
yeah,
was using tools like that to extract the image and
yeah,
change that into an image file. So that's really cool. I never thought of doing it that way, but yeah, you could extrapolate the image from the memory dump data at the time.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is pretty neat.
Yes, so
And
it
did
worked.
you do that for any other platforms as well, or just the
No,
links?
just for that kind of some kind of a small side project. It was pretty fun, trying to get exposed to the Lynx platform, and just kind of as a kid, it was kind of a dream to go and visit Atari's headquarters in Paris, France, and seeing the equipment and talk to them, kind of wow, it was kind of pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Um,
also saw a working prototype of an Atari ST laptop.
oh wow, really?
Yes, yes.
Did
It
they
was
ever
kind of
make that?
no, I really never made it, but I saw one, so it was pretty kind of
So would that have been early '90s then?
yes, 90s, about 90, yeah, yeah, could be.
I'm trying because I remember in the early '80s, a portable computer was essentially the full desktop computer with a little 8-inch
Yeah,
CRT in it. So it was not really portable, but the only
yeah.
thing portable about it is you didn't have to take the monitor and the computer; you just took the computer. But once you got into the '90s, I think it
So
was a
that's a
little bit
mixture
more.
of
Yeah, all
maybe
right,
that one. So
that's
this
kind of
was
what I was expecting.
yeah, so pretty fun, Would be
Absolutely,
pretty amazing if I actually made it.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, what other projects have you done? I believe you said you'd worked on one other Atari project as well, correct?
Yes. So I mean, me and a friend, we developed a soundtracker for the Atari ST. So a soundtracker is like a music playing program for the Atari and Amiga. and it looks like that. And you can, make your, music and, using 4 channels, and you had, sound effects and samples you could, play. It was a pretty popular way of making music back then. So we actually kind of, sold it and, published it and sold it in the store. So I actually have some physical, things. That I think is pretty kind of fun to have,
Yeah, absolutely. So people would
And
buy that software in order just to create music. So it's like just a
yes,
music creation software. Now, would that use
yes, yes.
MIDI and an external keyboard, or could you use the
No,
keyboard or both? Or
I think you made it just on the keyboard, on the computer keyboard. Uh, so no MIDI involved. Instead, you made it on the computer, and you could, have 4 tracks, and then you could make, sound effects, and it was pretty kind of interesting project to make.
absolutely, I love music, and I want to be a musician myself, and I'm always so impressed at all the people who still today do music and soundtracks on older platforms, because
Yeah,
they kind of, using the limitations of those platforms, have to come up with
yeah,
some really creative ways to get some awesome music. The musician Remute does that a lot now. He's done 7 different consoles where he writes his albums directly on there.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very cool. I should pass him along your software and see if he could write a
yeah,
song with it now.
yeah,
That is, I mean, I'm always in awe at stuff like this. You went
yeah,
from being a kid at these giant meetups, learning, doing everything you can to learn all this stuff, to getting flown out or to Atari to be able to help them get screenshots, to then making your own software for the platform. I mean, this is, talk about a career path, right?
yeah. But I think the fun thing is that you start something, but you never know where you will end up. You just can start doing something, and you don't know the goal. You're just do it. And then eventually, oh,
Yes.
it did succeed, or oh, it failed, or But I think you just to have the courage and just do things. If you believe in it, you should just do it. And one other project I did after the Mega Drive was that I me and some friends, we bought a CD-ROM writer back then. It was kind of pretty big box. That you used to write your CD-ROMs. So basically, I eventually created kind of 2 CD-ROMs called Programmer 7, 1, and 2. So because I had a lot of kind of source codes and tools and document tutorials, on my hard drive. So I thought and I also had a BBS back then. So I had a lot of I had a good collection of good source codes, tools, utilities, documents, tutorials, text files. So I thought why not compile it and make a compilation CD? So those 2 CD-ROMs eventually was pretty popular. Kind of I sold it in the US through Infomagic, was a kind of a CD-ROM reseller, publisher back then. And so I made those 2. So eventually the first one I just made, and sent it to the factory for printing. So I got back, a truck came back, a few weeks later with 1,000 CD-ROMs to my student dorm room, and then I had this pile of CDs on the floor, and now what? What should I do? So basically, okay, I need to sell them. I had no plan, but okay, let's start make a website, start online kind of e-commerce, some advertisement in magazines and some trade shows, and finding some resellers. So it was pretty well, I sold quite a bunch of them, and I sold all of them, and I also made a second one, and that was pretty good back then, when people did not have the internet still, so people were actually buying CD-ROMs. But eventually, I was tired of the CD-ROM business, so I thought, the web, internet, let's kind of upload everything online. So in '96, I made my first website called Programmer 7, and I was doing it, as at the evenings, on my spare time, building it, maintaining it and doing all the kind of, everything from the kind of DevOps, deployment to hardware to buying servers and co-locate them in the US, and, the hosting, and, so you learn the full trade of what it takes, takes to operate a website, the SEO. You had, domain names and the kind of
Yeah, I'm laughing
reliability.
because I know exactly the growing pains
Yeah,
that you're talking about.
yeah, and you were kind of. I went to sites like I can't remember the name, Ubit, trying to find good bids on Dell servers, and have them shipped to my co-location provider in the US, for hosting it, So it was a pretty fun time. And then around 2000, I got a advertisement deal, so I could actually kind of quit my day job and work on this website full time. So I spent 8 years full time maintaining it, building, selling, updating this website. So I had like a 500,000 visitors a month on this website, and then I sold it in like 2008, just before Stack Overflow came into the picture and killed the kind of independent websites. I mean,
Yeah,
back then
I
it was
do
really
have to
good.
just back up for a second and
Yeah,
remind everybody that that's 500,000 visitors a month in the mid 2000s, before everybody had a cell phone in their pocket and was online every day. So, I
yeah,
mean, I don't know what that would translate to hits today, but it's got to be at least double, right? It would
yeah,
be equivalent to somebody today having 1 million or 2 million
yeah,
hits a month. So that's a popular website.
yeah. And back then you could actually see your own kind of Google ranking. So I had a Google rank of 8 of 10, so it was pretty kind of big, SEO kind of authority. So people were actually asking me to can you please link to me? Here's some money. Please link to us. It was good business back then.
Yeah, that's back when Google was a search engine and not
Yeah,
a surveillance and tracking company. So,
yeah, and do not evil. Do no, don't be evil.
yeah.
I like it.
Yeah,
I
now it's
like
don't be
it.
evil unless it affects the bottom line, and then we're going to turn the
Yes.
other cheek and pretend it never happened. But
Uh,
huh. Man, that's awesome.
oh,
I had my first website in '96 talking about, as funny and embarrassing as this is, the same thing I do now. The middleman between really smart people writing software
yeah,
emulators and teach or telling people about it. And funny too, I was always in IT, so I called it PC Tools after a software that I used in like '85 when I was a little
yeah,
kid. I'm sure it was still existed then, but I didn't sell it because most of it was free and open source. But there was a few things that I may or may not have copied and put on there myself, which I was 16. So, it's not like I was selling these off the back of a truck. I was
yeah,
passing it along to my friends. But my CD burner was the size of a normal CD-ROM drive. And when you
yeah.
got your CD burner, it was probably the size of
A
at its
VHS player.
smallest, it might have been a bookshelf speaker, but it was probably closer to a mini tower PC, right?
Yeah, it was more like a VHS player, movie player.
Oh, okay.
That
You
kind
had
of
one of the
size.
wider ones then. All
Yes.
right, yeah. I definitely
And
remember seeing those, and in
yeah,
blank discs were like, I think they were $20 a piece or something like
they
that.
were pretty expensive. I think we paid like, almost like $8, $9 per disc, and then you crashed a few, on the way, and failed burning, so you had quite a lot of kind of oh, damaged discs. But back then, my first website, I was using the kind of the famous Matt's CGI scripts, Perl scripts for doing my own first website. It was kind of pretty kind of it worked, but was kind of pretty kind of terrible, and I hardly understood anything. It was kind of written in Perl, and but kind of just random things. But it kind of built my first website, and then and then I'm made it all by myself, make my own forum software, and my own kind of back end, and and did all by myself. But it was a fun journey, kind of you know getting your hands dirty and trying to kind of do everything from the kind of server maintenance to building a website and learning the back end, and learning security, and so on. So it's kind of, it was a big fun project back then.
Yeah, I agree. I unfortunately forgot all of that knowledge, but
Yeah,
for a while there, I think in the early 2000s, I hosted my own server out of my house once we switched over to
yeah,
cable modem from dial up. Before
yeah,
that, I didn't, I was very limited to the stuff that I could do, but
yeah,
it was such a cool experience going through all of that and the
yeah,
steps that you go through, the things that you learn. I applied all of that knowledge to everything I did afterwards in life.
yeah,
So it was, even though you could say that all the stuff I did then in that period was really kind of useless. It maybe in and about itself it was, but
yeah.
everything I took away from that's been applied to everything else I did. So it's kind of cool to see other people going
Yeah.
down that same journey with this
But
stuff.
but I really feel think that all the kind of principles from back then still applies today. I mean, when you go to the cloud, you still have to think about the kind of you know latencies and transaction speeds and reliability and all the kind of principles still holds today. The same as with back then.
Absolutely.
You I think you're almost like a bit spoiled today because you create some cloud service, but you don't think about transactions and the latencies and the cost and and all the kind of fundamental principles for how do you actually make something work well. I think they're
Yeah,
almost
I feel like technology as a whole is the same way now
yeah,
because like for music is a great example in that the tools that you have today, like I use a Motu M4 to both for speaking now and to record my guitar,
yeah,
and this going into Reaper, which I paid for my copy because I
yeah,
support software developers, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You could record a guitar into this and have it
yeah,
processed at a studio, and it's identical in every way to recording your guitar directly in that studio.
yeah,
And this thing costs like $250, and you can get $100 ones that are probably just as good. So I'm completely spoiled in that I didn't
yeah,
need to have any of the knowledge that you would need to really record a guitar before this. And because of that, it allows so many more musicians to record and so many more musicians to get out there. But the two things are there now that there's so many, there's, less to go, less people have time and money to go around buying it all.
yeah,
And at the same time, a lot of those things that you learned going through those, like how to put the microphones in front, which is the same as how to set up your the back end of your
yeah,
server, all of that, learning why you do things the way you do, not only did it affect the music, it gave you the knowledge to understand how it all comes together. So it's the same thing. You could go on Squarespace now and you could put together a website that looks like something that would have cost 20 grand back in 2000,
yeah, of
and you
course.
don't need to know anything other than how to drag and drop and cut and paste. And it's both amazing, but people do, hopefully at least a small group of people need
Yeah.
to understand and take the time to know what goes in the back end of stuff. So
But I
it's
also
pretty
think that we
interesting.
get more and more abstractions nowadays. It's more kind of layers of abstractions between the underlying hardware and the things we make. So, when you talk about database, you go through some library and it says magic works, but you don't really understand, the kind of interaction between your application and the database and how your queries impacts performance, and you have no idea and you don't have a feeling for how it ticks. It's like, yeah, if you talk like compare a Tesla to an old motor, because you can hear the motor and you can hear if the spark plugs doesn't kind of work properly, and you can hear if it's not aligned. But if you have a Tesla, you haven't you don't hear anything. It just kind of just works, and then you don't have the feeling of the mechanics of how things work under the hood. So nowadays I work as a teacher and trainer and trying to really kind of, you know, explain. I mean, you don't know anything until you can explain to someone else. So that's I think my principles are in my teaching. I always try to kind of lift, remove the layers and really go deep down to really get a good fundamental picture and mental picture of how things actually work. Because if you don't understand it, you can't do it properly. It's all for example, like security or performance. If you don't understand the security principles of a website today, you will be hacked, in minutes.
Mm. It's funny. There's an old saying, teachers can't do and doers can't teach, or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. And I think it's not quite true in that it takes people who understand exactly what it is they're doing to teach the teachers.
Yeah,
So for your job and your position, you have to fully understand what it is that you're trying to teach
yeah,
people.
yeah, of
And
course.
somebody who's a really good teacher could just absorb the knowledge that
Yeah,
you've given them, and then they go and teach other people how to do it because
yeah, yeah,
they know exactly how to talk to people. They could look
yeah,
at somebody and get through to them and see who's understanding and who's not. So I actually think it's a combination of things. Is there's always the middlemen teachers like us that have to understand the concepts and then get them out to the people, the general teachers of it. So it is kind of funny to see that, but you're right, and that's a problem. It's a very good problem to have, but it's a problem I run into all the time. In that I've even asked some people who I speak to and I talk about their videos and stuff to come and write their own segments about it on RetroRGB.com because I pretty much get what they're talking about, but
yeah,
not on the level that they do. So I
yeah,
want them to come in and write the posts so that I could do a better job teaching people. So
yeah,
I get to live both roles. I get to be the person that fully understands a project and teaches the people who go out and teach everybody else, and I also get to be the person that just can reread a paragraph really charismatically without quite understanding what I'm talking about.
yeah. But I also think the challenge is that there's so many new developers coming into the market and starting to getting their first job, and I think it's a big still big challenge for a new developer to really kind of grasp it all. We have spent from in my case almost 40 years kind of learning the trade, and I know how a database works and I know how a web works, and I can relate things. But if you're a junior developer coming into the market, there's so much things you have to learn. The database and you have the HTTP and the web and the security and all the JavaScript and backend, frontend, and it's a big topic, and I think the kind of knowing it all is impossible. You have to kind of actually ignore. Okay, but from my point of view, JavaScript, I will never be good at it, so I will never kind of bother learning it. So, but I like the backend, I like the security part of things, but I just realized that React, Angular, I will never be good at it. So I will not bother learning it out because I will never be good at it. But the backend I really, really enjoy. So I will stay there, doing backend APIs or services. That's fun.
I think with all fields like that, all technology fields that are growing at the exponential rate that they are,
Yeah,
I think that if you're young getting into this, or I shouldn't even say young, just if you're inexperienced in something, dive directly in and then figure out what other info you need. And I think a story that punctuates this a little scary but really well is that there is one chip that I think it was Texas Instruments makes, and a company bought like 50,000 of them and said, "Hey, we're using it for this application and none of the chips are working. We thought it
yeah,
could be a bad manufacturing run, so we bought another one. We use it for this exact use. Can you help us?" And Texas
mm,
Instruments came, I think it was them. So please, if I get the wrong company, don't sue me, TI. But the company came back and said, actually, that chip was designed by a legacy team, and nobody here now understands how that works.
mm, mm,
So your company is the only company using it for this one specific thing. Everybody else uses it for something that it does work. So
yeah,
we
yeah,
can't help. We don't know if the chip's broken. We don't know if it was never able to do that. The person is long gone who designed it, and we don't know how to reverse engineer it. So you know, it's a good punctuation to your point, but it's also a little scary in that we need people to go back and be experts in all of these things. So not everybody doesn't have to be an expert in everything, but if you're
sure.
really into this stuff and you love it and you think, all right, that's my niche, learn about it and teach other people about it. And even if you're a terrible teacher, which no offense, I work with a lot of people who stink at teaching other people what they know,
Yeah,
but have patience then. Understand that you're not the world's best teacher, so teach people who are and get this stuff out.
yeah,
Otherwise, it's just going to get lost forever. And, a lot of these, it's start to scary to think that, our grandkids might wake up one day and something important stops working because everybody who designed it's dead and no one knows how to keep it. No one knows how to redesign it. They just know how to keep it maintained,
I really think that from my own point of view, if I kind of want to learn something new, I really kind of let's build a training class in that topic. So I started for a few years learning about the OpenID Connect, OAuth tokens, authentication, authorization, and it was kind of really kind of a deep rabbit hole by itself. So okay, but I really I was kind of get a request from companies to can you help us with this topic, and kind of maybe not, but so I can okay. I will build a training class in that topic because then I need to kind of pick it apart, try to break it down into kind of manageable pieces, and then learning piece by piece and trying to experiment and tinker and creating good training material. So eventually I kind of build quite a few training classes in that topic. But on that journey, I learned it, good enough so I could explain to someone else. I could help companies, coaching them, and I also kind of, to really kind of improve my skills. I also kind of started on the Stack Overflow kind of, for 2 years ago on that topic of identity and OpenID Connect, OAuth, trying to kind of answer and helping others. Because if I can explain to someone else, I really kind of, repeat it, and then, you learn it as you kind of practice. So I think, practicing in different ways, training, creating training material, answering questions, giving, webinars in that topic. You kind of repeat the topic over and over again. And then eventually, and obviously this is simple now. But back then, it was kind of pretty kind of, wow, big rabbit hole.
Yeah. Do you ever go back into things that you've done, into training sessions that you've written? Like, do you ever Google the answer to a question and then the answer is something you wrote, years ago and you totally forgot it?
Yes.
It- what a
Especially,
strange feeling, because I have a
yeah,
very good memory. Like, I'll remember somebody will say something and I'll go, "Oh yeah, I was 4 years old and they were wearing this shirt and we were in this
yeah,
room," and people look at me like, that's weird that you remember all those details. And
yeah,
then uh, on the flip side of things, I'll be like, I wonder if anybody's ever done this before. And there's like a 7-page write up that I did, detailed with every single
yeah,
thing that you need to know. That I go, I don't remember a single
yeah.
thing about this.
So basically, my when I make training classes, it becomes my own kind of private notes, So I can go back to my
Mhm.
training material and that is how that worked. So it becomes my notes and I organize in a nice, clean way, and with a nice, good structure. So I really think, if you want to learn something new, try to make it training material. And even if you don't never teach it to someone else, but having it in a nice kind of clean way and breaking it down into kind of small pieces that you learn by doing.
No, that for me personally, I am not the type of person that could read a book and then start doing it. I have to start doing it and then read
Yeah,
the book,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden the pieces immediately start to fall into place. But I can't just
yeah,
absorb the info and know how to do it. And I have a lot of friends who can, and I don't think there's
yeah,
a right or wrong way. I think it's whatever's right for you personally is the right way
yeah.
to do it. So,
So for example, I kind of for many kind of years for some time ago, I need to kind of learn about Git, the version control. I mean, I really kind of want to kind of deep dive deep into Git and really understand it. So I mean, you start making this kind of slides and presentations about how things is connected, and this is my kind of mental notes, and I can go back and read my old kind of material, and oh, that is how it works, and then you can follow the kind of thread, along how things are connected, and so that's how I learn nowadays, build material.
yeah,
So
that makes sense.
yeah, so
Do you put any of your talks or your discussions online, or are you mostly just hired by companies to go out and do private training
I
sessions?
do mostly for companies training nowadays. I did some at some schools earlier, but nowadays it's mostly for companies. I do have maybe one or two webinars online, but mostly private for companies, or open classrooms for companies.
Interesting. One of the best sessions I've ever taken in my life, I think it was a Windows 2000 administration course, and it was somebody who was a little bit in the middle. Companies would hire them to do this, but it would also be, you could sign up if you wanted on your own. But it was just the way the person presented the data,
Yeah,
and how they did it, and what the tools that they showed, just the same way you are with a slideshow. It's not that they had any magical stuff with them. I learned so much in that 2-day session. I
yeah,
learned more than 18 months of
yeah,
an accredited college course, or whatever you want to call it. So it's just, I always listen when people say that they're trainers and they do stuff like that,
yeah,
because some of the best training sessions out there come in that same
yeah.
form.
But I really think, if you can break it down and, to make your own kind of mental model how things relate, then, it's easy to explain to someone else, because, you will always meet a junior developer, and you need to explain it. And if you can't explain it, you know, you maybe feel stupid. But I really think that, being able to explain things, is important, if you're a senior and trying to help others. So I really can enjoy the kind of the training side, because then you have to repeat things, you have to dive deep into concepts and really kind of look under the hood how things works, and how does the compiler thinks about some coding statements, for example. So I really think it's pretty a good way to keep and stay current at my age. I'm 51 years old, and I want to be on the cutting edge, and doing training and creating training material is a good way to stay current. Being attractive on the market.
Yeah, those are all good points, and that's something that yeah, I guess that's a personality trait that everybody that I looked up to when I was coming up in my first couple jobs all had, and that you know while I did, and I don't mean to be offensive, but while I did work with that stereotypical grumpy IT guy a million times
Oh,
over, who just, they knew what they knew,
yeah,
they hated everybody, they didn't want to talk to anybody, they were
yeah,
terrible at explaining stuff, they got mad at you for asking questions. There was
yeah,
a lot of those in every company, but in every single place that I worked, there was always a group of people, or at least one or two, that at any age, I think the guy that I first apprenticed under was like 67 years old,
yeah,
and he knew everything. He was still up on all the new technology coming out. He
mm,
loved it the same way he did when he was a kid. He was so passionate about it. And even though it didn't all get applied, he was a little too old school. We would do manual tape backups to every single computer one at a time, because he didn't like doing things over the network. This is in
yeah,
2001,
yeah,
by the way.
yeah,
So it's a little, he was a little late to the party with that one, but it's still,
yeah,
the passion for learning was
yeah,
always there. And it was just something that excited them, whether or not they did it for a living. And
yeah.
that's,
But
that's
I really,
definitely what I want to
yeah,
continue.
yeah. But I really think that as an IT guy, my personally, before I went into the kind of training side, I was kind of scared. I don't want to do training. Let the pros do it. I actually started a training company for like 11 years ago. So in the beginning, I did not want to do training at all, because now my voice is not so good, and it's scary to speak in front of people. But then you know the things you're afraid of, you should try to do more often. So I actually started to do some smaller training, and eventually kind of, wow, this is fun. So I think this is I was kind of a pretty kind of stereotypical shy introvert, IT nerd, but trying to expose yourself, going to meetups, doing some talks, and of course in the beginning you will fail and your slides are terrible, but still, I think getting out there, trying to present, you will grow as a developer and a person by to challenge yourself to speak in front of others. And now I really love it.
Yeah, that's the second time you brought that point up, and that's something that I live by, and that just do it. If you want to do it, just do it.
Yeah,
And that's, this website that I started. You also mentioned, starting something, not knowing where it goes. The website
yeah,
started as a Google Doc that I thought 3 or 4 of my friends might like. I had no idea I'd end up 10 years later talking to developers around the world that I look up to.
yeah,
And the same thing, even with just doing interviews and podcasts. I just,
yeah,
one day I was like, I said I'm going to do it, so I'm just going to do it.
yeah,
Let's just start and see what happens. And I'm sure my first couple were horrible, but they're
yeah,
less painful now.
yeah. But eventually, you can stand in front of people, you can speak for days about topics, weeks, no problems. But in the beginning, I was really, really shy, oh, it will not work. But now, it's fun, it's not a problem to speak, in front of people. So a message to all your IT guys, try to challenge yourself, find a local meetup, do get involved, do some presentations. I really think you will grow as a person.
I agree 100%. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to stop doing what you're doing and become a trainer,
Sure.
but just put yourself out there. And
Yeah.
I think one of a common trait in this is I don't think a lot of people realize how likable they are. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people that I deal with just see themselves as that introverted, retro gaming nerd. And obviously, I'm using the word nerd as a compliment. I am a huge nerd myself, but they see
Yeah.
themselves as that, and they assume that they're not going to get along with other people. And then you
Yeah.
throw them in a room full of people. I always love doing this too, and everybody's friendly and everybody's getting along, and it's very cool to see the look on their face is like, oh yeah, all right, this is fun. I could do this. This is neat. I like people.
But I think most people also maybe don't understand the time and effort it takes to make a good training material. Building good exercises and good presentations and good demonstrations. It's really really hard work. So I spent countless hours and nights and weekends, building and updating course materials because it's really hard work.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're preaching to the choir now. A lot of the videos, the one video I did was talking about video capture techniques, and it was
Yeah.
like a 40-minute video because it was a step-by-step thing, but that took about 80 hours worth of work in order to
Yeah.
get to the point that I could do a 40-hour or a 40-minute video.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's so much goes into this, and I have tremendous respect to anybody who puts the time and effort in to try to make it their best.
But
So
yeah, yeah, yes, yes,
no, I mean, I just kind of, I've been really enjoying this talk and hearing about your journey from then till now. And I was just going to ask if there's anything else that we didn't quite cover that you wanted to talk about or mention that you thought would be fun, or have we
no, I
gone through the
think
tour
it's,
journey?
yeah, I really think it's, um, you know, uh, that's all I have for now. But you never know what I will do next.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's absolutely true. Just so I'll definitely keep in touch. If you ever do anything gaming related, let me know. And I think I already did follow you on Twitter, and I'll subscribe to your
yeah,
blog as well in case you ever talk about anything else that's interesting to me, because I not only just gaming, technology and
yeah,
computers in general, I'm always all about. So I'll definitely follow you. And if people also want to follow your work, I'm assuming Twitter is one of the places because that's
yeah.
where I
Twitter's
discovered you.
one, and then I have my personal blog and I guess you can link to that one in the show note. But I have my blog here, um, and I can give you the link to that one. And also, if
Yeah.
someone has, or curious about the training side, training business, feel free to reach out to me or connect on LinkedIn. And, if you have any questions about training, I've been working with you in the training business for like 12 years. So I really know it, pretty well by now. So if anyone wants to, you know, become a trainer, and you don't know where to start, feel free to reach out, I'm happy to help.
I'm sure people would appreciate that. And for people
Yeah.
that want to hire you for your training sessions, are you predominantly Europe only, or do you do globals over Zoom or
I mean,
something like that? Or
for the last 2 years, I've been doing a remote only, so I do worldwide, training in backend, .NET, architecture, authentication, and other topics.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the
Yeah,
time to do this. This was an enjoyable talk.
it was
I
fun.
really loved hearing your story
Yeah.
about all this stuff, and I'll definitely keep in touch. So thank you very much, Tor.
Thank you.